Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Just Common Sense podcast. Today, I'm joined by State of the Nation. He's a good friend, he's a brother in Christ, and he's also another member of Reform. We talk a lot online, don't we, in private about what's going on internally in the news, the future of the right, and there's been a lot going on over the last couple of days, haven't there, with defections to Reform from independents. I can't believe I'm even saying this, but a Green Party councillor, what shows that we're actually winning over a lot of people who otherwise probably wouldn't get involved in conservative right wing politics. And of course, we're won over a lot of conservative councillors. Obviously, there was a big news the other day when they were hosting the meeting for the new Scottish leader was being announced. And then we had the news break that Kemi Badenoch got rid of Robert Jenrick at the Conservative Party. So we're here to discuss that. How are you doing, Joseph? Welcome to the channel, mate.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's actually the nation state, but never mind that. You
Yeah,
said
I
state of the nation.
apologize. Yeah.
Same thing, I suppose. No problem at all. Yeah, just before you begin, I was reading just now that Suella Braverman is rumoured to be the next person to join, but I think that was on the cards regardless. But Suella Braverman's actually the next one on the cards, apparently.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I think this is going to set a precedent within the Conservative Party that there is no future if you're in the real conservative right for you. I mean, I think this will be the thing what kind of breaks the camel's back, really. I think we possibly even may see people like Jacob Rees-Mogg come over to our side eventually because of the Conservative Party brand is dead as it is. There's no future for a real Conservative Party in that party anymore. What do you think about that?
Yeah, because we've had, just so people understand, because we both talked to each other offline and we chat about politics, generally speaking, a number of other things, but generally politics. Looking at the Tory party today, they're pretty much on the path of the French Republicans. If you look at the poll numbers in France, they are just nowhere to be seen. They're still there, obviously, as a party, and they'll probably still be around just for the sake of. They've almost come, I would say, arguably similar to the Lib Dems in the UK, the Conservative Party in France. Not once anymore. They're just there as an extra, so you just go and vote for them on the polls if there's no one else you want to choose from. And of course, populism is quite big in France, as you expect. I don't think it's actually as big as they make it out to be in this country, but it is getting bigger.
Right.
So the Tory party, as we heard Robert Jenrick speak yesterday, and this is what's so frustrating, is that when I heard him speak, I thought, where was this guy from day one?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the usual back and forth we've seen with conservative politicians that they come out of the closet, so to speak. In this case, actually say they're conservative, right? And I'm actually one of them, and I was hiding behind all these liberals in the party. So, yeah, it is getting that way for them. Obviously local elections being cancelled again for many parts is a bit of a bummer. But you know what? People are paying attention now. So, you know, let's not think that they're going to get away with this, and we'll see where it takes us.
No, 100%. And I want to go back to what you actually said about where the Conservative Party kind of is going. I think it's basically in the same position that the Liberal Party after the Second World War, where Labour kind of took its place in politics. I know that obviously very different in ideologies. Well, we say that, but the Conservative Party has ceased to be a Conservative Party for a very long time, as you already know, because you were a member of the Conservative Party yourself at once upon a time, wasn't you?
Well, also Labour as well, yeah, both of them. Yeah. For my sins, unfortunately, but yeah, they it was a shame because you can see before people get kind of an idea how it works in these parties. There are good people in these political parties. They get frustrated as much as we do. So when you said earlier before we before I began talk, I should say, you mentioned how there was like a Green councillor, joining over. There are people you'll find there is a crossover on certain policies they'll agree on. They don't agree with everything, but they do agree on a number of things. So, in Labour as well, it was expected that you're going to see the red wall seats become the threat, definitely at the next election. But certainly in Labour, the meetings I've had with them, you think they're all like, oh, it's all cheering on, singing Kumbaya. Ain't that at all. these meetings are, when we saw that, just I don't want to get sidetracked, but we see these controversy about Kent Council and how they, were arguing on the stream, on the chat.
Yeah.
And had a video of this. Well, if you had a video at the Labour meetings of councils, believe me, it'll be 10 times worse. I mean, we're not talking about throwing chairs at each other, but it gets really aggressive, like proper aggressive. And that's no comparison. The one I saw when I was at Labour Party meetings, they were 10 times worse than that. So
I could imagine.
It's one of those things where they have their own battles within the party, and guess what? If we get in the next election, we're gonna have our own battles as well. It's gonna happen.
Of course, it happens with every political party, and Reform's still finding its feet, isn't it? It's a new baby in the grand scheme of things of politics, right? We've had the main two parties kind of dominate politics for like almost the last 100 years, if you want to say it that. So it's going to have its internal struggles. Now, one of the internal struggles I wanted to talk to you about, there's a lot of people making a lot of noise about people like Robert Jenrick, who are actually very principled people who actually stood down as immigration minister. And a lot of people feel like we shouldn't take him into the fold. We shouldn't take him into the party. What would your response to that be? Because I kind of feel like if people actually align with us and they got bogged down by the party machine, like you actually said, because there's a massive thing like the party whip, for example, and the internal stuff inside the main two parties, what would you say to that? Because I think we should give people a chance if they are genuinely what they say that they are and what they believe.
If you look at anybody who's defected, and if you look at their profiles, if they're just like recent members of the party, as in this case in the Tory party, I would be kind of concerned about where they might go, because they obviously, being a short time at party, you just change like that. Robert Jenrick's been there for quite some time, a long time. Now, I definitely wasn't happy with the fact that he kind of got aggressive defensively. And we know Twitter is kind of one of those things which has the constant back and forth, retweeting, trying to joke and get one over the other person.
Yeah, of course.
And he spent a lot of time defending himself rather than just saying, you know what, guys, you're right, I did screw up. And that's what people want. People are very forgiving in this country. If you look at the way when people do things, right? I'm not talking like heinous stuff, but in politics, when you do something, people come back from it. And I don't know Robert Jenrick personally, none of them personally, but when I heard that Danny Kruger joined, I knew there was something there. This guy would never have thought about joining Reform and going near Nigel Farage, not because he hates him, it's because the fact that he felt that he had to go because he saw what the Tory party was becoming. And he said, are these guys listening to me? So he's trying to find maybe an avenue. I don't know what his ambitions are, none of us know this, right?
No, of course.
The problem we have in Reform is this, I think, is that when it comes to people like Jenrick, people are going to say things really negative about it, and then eventually he joins the team, is like, wow, he's great, it's fantastic. It's okay to have criticism, and he should do. This happens to every single party. We should do it for Reform as well. I'm actually unfazed or not really bothered by it. I just want to see action done. So if he comes out, he makes good points, he makes the case for Reform UK exactly as Farage and the party wants, then it's all good. Because in the end, we really have to win at the next election. And I know we could win two ways, outright majority or the coalition, potentially with the Tories. I'd rather not have the latter, even though if it comes to it, I have to take it. So these guys joining in, for Nigel Farage has been around for a long time. He has a grasp of what's happening. It should be noted, by the way, just quickly, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, a week ago actually, there was an article in the Telegraph. Leila Cunningham, who's the mayoral candidate for Reform UK, actually came out and said this guy should not even join Reform, should not be allowed to. And essentially, that's what she's making the point that we can't trust him, right? She didn't, as one would argue, not outright rule it out. But the same article did note that Farage did mention that he was open to the idea of him joining. So to say this came out of nowhere is nonsense. It's not actually true at all.
Of course.
Farage would have spoke to this guy, and Zia Youssef, Leila Cunningham, Lee Anderson, Bridge Ties would have known about this happening behind the scenes. But in terms of actual, officially joining, that's different. But knowing he was good pals with him, yes. And I'll say this about Jacob Rees-Mogg. I don't see him joining at all. I think he would rather go to his grave early before joining Reform. Not because he hates Reform, is because I think in some ways it's about his father, who's actually all out, you can imagine he was all out Tory. and he something inside of him feels as if he was disappointed. If that makes sense. We'll see. This year's been crazy. The start of the year after 2 weeks. So I suspect we're going to see a lot more craziness from now till May. So we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah, of course. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg said, "I'm Tory to my veins," once upon a time. And
Yes.
I do think it would take a lot for him to cross over the floor. I would never say never. A week is a long time in politics, like you said. We've seen a lot happen over the last year, good and bad, of course. And yeah, we're going to have our internal struggles within the Reform Party because every single party does. Like, I think there's overemphasis, especially from a lot of even people on the political right, like the YouTubers. They like to stir up drama, and I think people tend to gravitate towards it. I don't know why. Me and you have had these discussions in private, but these things are quite normal for a political organization or a political party, aren't they? There's always going to be falling out. People are going to split. People are going to form their own organizations, and this is quite natural, and this is something that always happens, isn't it? I think one good thing of what came out of this situation is this. You notice how Nigel, ever since he's been the leader of UKIP and now Reform UK, he's always kept his cards close to his chest, and he never leaks anything, does he? I think this goes to show that he's a different strain of politician, that he's not going to throw people under the bus. So people are more likely going to come to him and actually have conversations about defecting, aren't they?
Yeah, and you think about Robert Jenrick, actually, because of the back and forth was having a lot of people, because obviously he's getting partly blamed for what will be happening under Boris Johnson, which is understandable. You know, people have to remember we don't have short-term memories here. We remember what happened, what's going on.
Yeah.
And what happened with COVID, of course, was, you know, to be fair, that really wrecked any comeback from the Tories as a whole. Not because just with the vaccines and the shutdowns, that was obviously horrible, but economically it really was damaging. And you know, all these things have been said about Farage as well, about his what he did at school and everything else. And Jenrick would never have gone near us along with Danny Kruger, no chance. And by the way, these two guys who are people think they're like backbenchers, and that's all they are. They've been well embedded within the Tory party at the upper echelon of the party itself, and they would have known the things that have been said about Farage over the years, because it was regurgitated basically, the things that he might apparently said at school about Jewish people and the Holocaust and all those other things that came out. And there's no way Tories would go near that at all. Even the ones who are quote unquote right wing of the party wouldn't even think about becoming part of Reform UK if they thought that was true. So they obviously don't think it's true. They obviously think Farage is the one who's going to be the best opportunity we have against Labour. And apparently there's more to come. Of course, there's a Labour MP apparently, or someone Labour. I don't think it's a Labour MP maybe. In a week or so, that we're going to find out who that person is who's going to join as well.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And something that I would actually add to the conversation is a lot of people think that we shouldn't take anyone from the two major parties or the back on just in general, right? But we actually need people with the experience. I sometimes think people, because they have this like very naive view of the way that politics actually works and the inside of Westminster, the protocols, I would actually say we should take the best of both of the parties and put it into one if we're able to win those people over. Would you agree with that? Because we need people with actual experience. It's good to have people from working class backgrounds who haven't always been in the parliamentary machine, who have done real jobs. Obviously, that's something that Reform has actually done very well, been able to recruit people who are not career politicians, but we do need people with that knowledge. Would you agree with that?
We definitely need it. People who know how the civil service works, how our courts work as well.
Yeah.
Legislation is very, very important, because if we can't get that right, then we get nothing done.
Yeah.
So this is actually a very important aspect of it. And there will be opportunities where, you know, we're not going to see 650 potential candidates that are going to come up from all previous parties, or all parties. And people keep talking about defections. I mean, if Robert Jenrick joined Advance UK, the people at Advance UK will be cheering and doing all this other stuff. Just 1 second.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. I lost what I was going to. Yeah. So about the candidates and that, there will be opportunities that will come up for people to be vetted, and people need to come forward and actually put names forward. They keep waiting for something to happen for them, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Robert Jenrick didn't wait. He actually went straight to Reform and said, "Can we have a talk?" Right? And most of the noise we see is actually online. In reality, what people think about defection, I don't think there's much opinion polls suggest there's such an impact or not. So we can't even go based on that. We should solely focus on, like you said, getting the best candidates possible. And people want to be involved in politics, but they're too afraid maybe to be of encouragement. Ask questions. I mean, we've got the internet for crying out loud. We can network with each other. You can start learning more about right now as you speak. I mean, you have time to do this. If you don't have time, but you want to be a candidate, and you kick up a fuss every time, well, I'm sorry, it's tough. We don't have time for that. Farage warned about this whole thing about election coming up. This is actually a very important point I want to bring forward.
Yeah.
That he says that we could have an election in 2027, potentially, maybe 2020, before the 5-year period. We need to be ready for that. So do you guys have time to fret and complain and whine and moan and, why are we picking up these candidates? Farage can't wait for 2 years and think it'll be okay. He needs to act now, and as if we got an election tomorrow. That's how he's looking at it.
Yeah.
So I completely understand people getting frustrated, thinking, why we've got these ex-MPs from Tories and so on and so forth. Yes, you're right. You're right to question it, and you should keep an eye on this and be on them 24/7 if they make a mistake.
Of course.
Like we should be doing for all politicians. But the fact is, we don't have the time to sit about and wonder, can we go for a list of 100 candidates in one constituency and go and pick one from there? So, get involved like you are. I know you're heavily involved in the, where you are located. Yeah. I get in touch, but I'm not as involved as you are.
Yeah.
And, I've got no excuse then. I want to keep an eye. I say offer help when I can and assist and be of some use to the branch here. But people have to get involved. And I think it's a bit of they want it both ways. You don't want to get involved. And at the same time, you want to be part of it, right? That means you need to do something about that, which means you have to get off your backside and do something. And I'm sorry, but there's too many people sitting there and watching this happen unfold because they want the drama rather than acting and actually becoming part of it and actually being part of the process.
Yeah, no, of course. And me and you have had this conversation offline. Everyone wants someone to step forward, but they want to be 100 foot behind them and say, we're right behind you. But they don't actually put the man hours in to actually achieve anything, right? This has been a problem on the political right. And I think this is why a lot of people gravitate towards splitting within the political right. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily down to principle, right? I notice there's a theme inside the political right, and there has been for many years, that once we actually start getting somewhere, we tend to actually split. And I don't think that's down to principle. I think it's actually down to the fact there's doers and don'ters. I think there's people who throw their toys out the pram over the most silliest of things, right? Disagreements. We saw this with Advance UK. There isn't actually much Advance UK that they're offering what Reform UK is actually offering in a manifesto, right? It's all down to ego and narcissism and people falling out, right? And I've had Ben Habib on this channel. I like Ben Habib personally. I think he's a good guy. I think he done some very good work for Reform. But I have told him in the past, I don't see why you actually split down the middle. Personally, myself.
Yeah. We've all our own experiences of this. Not maybe necessarily with Tories and Labour, which I've seen myself, but with Reform, or let's say in the right-wing sphere, you get in the left too. But on our side, it's people who have differences with they've got the left and the centre left. Those on the left are actually willing to stand on their 2 feet and fight in their corner.
Yeah, of course.
On our side, it seems more of a what can you do for me attitude. And I heard, I'm not sure if it was the guy's name, Paul Thorpe. I can't remember the guy's name now. It was a stream. Yeah. He had a stream, and I admire his tenacity and I admire his spirit and all of it. And, you always have to look at the way I tell people to look at things is when you're listening to somebody, turn the camera off and just listen to the audio. That's the person you're listening to. worry about when I speak, forget about how bad I look, how bad you look. Listen to the words we say and what it actually means. And he made a great point about this when he said, all we do is talk about this stuff and we are saying how bad the country is. Are we actually going to act on this? And it's kind of a do or die attitude now for them.
Of course.
But yet you've got this party called Reform UK, which, by the way, he can become a member of it. Everybody else can become a member of it. You can go to your own constituency. You can start your own branch for Reform UK, fight it out, and actually win people over. That's how you do it. Politics has always been about that. And now it's become, I think, since obviously the digital age of the internet and everything else, and even maybe in some respect the blogs before the social media aspect came into the internet, that we don't know how to make good arguments. We seem to cherry pick fights with ourselves and even people on the opposite side of the aisle. And that's why they keep laughing at us and mocking us. So I do hope, and it's hopeful, because I saw this happen with UKIP as well. No doubt you've seen it too, where we had a Democrats and Veterans Party, which I'm not going to talk about too much because we haven't got time for that, where John Rhys Evans, who was a member of the UKIP party, started this party called Democrats and Veterans Party, and two people there who spoke at the event, two young men, didn't like the fact that one of the people in the party at one point on a response to somebody who asked about him, oh, what about Tom Robinson and and what's happening to him? He says, I don't care about Tom Robinson. I don't give a damn about that. I care about veterans, because the party's called Democrats and Veterans Party. And they decided to walk away, these two, along with other people. I've had enough of this. I'm moving on. And they went back to UKIP. You've gone full circle. And while these people are dancing away, apparently destroying our country and enriching themselves, we're talking about whether or not we want to talk one guy who clearly, I sympathize with the fact that he's not being treated as well, but he's not the answer. Okay, he's not against power. He's not even focused on that. He's focused on getting donations right now so he can sue Nigel Farage or take legal action against Nigel Farage. That's what it's come down to, man. Come on.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we need to stop idealizing some of the people inside the political right, and that's what I put that down to, the Tommy Robinson stuff. Like, I can sympathize with Tommy Robinson on quite a few things, but if history's taught us anything, he's not an election winner, is he? I mean, when he stood as an MEP, he didn't get very far. Any political party the gentleman has been involved in, it hasn't gone anywhere seriously. And the thing is, we only have one shot at this. And do we really want to turn around to our future children and grandchildren and say, well, guess what? We didn't save the country, but I threw my toys out of the pram and I fell out with everybody and we didn't win. And now this country is a shithole and you don't have a future, just because the leader of Reform didn't think it was right for Tommy Robinson to get involved in Reform. And Tommy even said himself, he doesn't want to be a member of Reform. He doesn't want to get inside of politics.
Yeah, by the way, it should be noted that Rupert Lowe even said last year? He said that Nigel Farage should never become the Prime Minister of this country. So he would take Keir Starmer again over Nigel Farage, basically. That's what it's come down to. I have no idea why. I'm not saying it's a grift, because I don't think he needs the money, of course, in this case, Rupert Lowe. But other people out there, you have to remember, if Reform UK were to win, and I'm not saying they're going to win, but they are odds on to become certainly the largest party, but whether they win or not is remaining to be seen. That's still too far away. That if they win and get a majority and start getting things done, all those people who are complaining and making money out of it from YouTube and that need to get a proper job. They need to get a proper job. They can't complain. There's no grievance anymore from it all. So maybe there's that aspect of it. Well, I'm not saying all of them are like that. There are some who generally do care and actually are willing to fight and do what they can. But I think it's more of and I've seen this happen certainly in America. We've seen it with MAGA and Trump and so on.
Of course,
they try to find their own avenue. So, you guys talk about all this culture stuff. And this is the thing that we could probably have another discussion another time, another stream, when it comes to the culture stuff. Because I've noticed this about when it comes to people talk about religion. And for example, I read the article just the other day in BBC. It came out with the story headline, record number of abortions again in this country, in England and Wales.
Yeah.
Record number of abortions. Who's having those abortions? Well, they ain't the non-white population, is it?
No.
And you're complaining about your population numbers dropping. You're complaining that your churches are closing and so on and so forth. Again, this is for another time, but I thought I'd bring those up briefly.
No, it's fine.
We get drawn to these things that are or we find out are good for us, like having a family, being part of a community, having a church nearby. But you run away as soon as we get near it. As in, you don't want to bring it into the space, saying, "Oh, it's too religious for us." And you speak to some of these people who are holding these crosses and whatever the St. George's flag at the protest, which are non-reform ones, of course. It doesn't mean they're not reform supporters. I'm just saying not sponsored by or advocated by reform. Then when you talk to them, they say, "No, it's not having the church there." It's like, sir, with all respect, if you want the church to still be there, you need to give money to it. End of story. No further discussion. So put your money where your mouth is and let's just get on with it. But they don't want to do that. There are some people out there who are, it's a good vibe, rather than actually, like you said before, and before we talk about this particular topic, that in reform in particular, not maybe in reform, I've seen in reform as well, where they just shy away from it. It's like, guys, this is the moment we have where we can actually get power and we should be pushing this stuff. I don't want it pushed by politicians. I want it pushed by from the bottom up. So we actually are the ground level where we are the troops, so to speak, and we advocate these things. And the politicians will respond to us. Okay, that's how it works. So, yeah, I've no faith in any other movement at the moment because, like you said, it's just going to splinter again. They're going to see the splinter from here, and that will also splinter to 2 and multiply to 4, 8, and so on and so forth. It's too much. It's just too much.
No, of course. And a lot of these people who criticize us and reform, they will go to a protest, wave a flag, maybe carry a cross, like you said. But when it comes down to it, they're nowhere to be seen when they have to put down the flag, the lager, and actually go out knocking on doors.
Right.
These people aren't serious. And the thing is, I'm not saying that they don't have legitimate concerns, but they actually don't actually have the will or the knowledge of actually how we win, where reform actually does. It's a realistic chance of us winning. It's kind of like how I keep on hearing a lot of people within the right wing keep on talking about a civil war, like they actually want it to happen, right? There isn't going to be a civil war tomorrow. And if there was, we're probably going to live under, martial law, and they would probably call in NATO to do it. There's no just throwing eggs at the police and then storming Parliament, taking power over from Keir Starmer. And half the problem is the people who actually call for this nonsense. If you ask them, well, how would you run the economy? They don't have an answer. They don't have a serious answer. They don't actually have a serious political philosophy behind them about how we actually fix these things. All they know is immigration bad, multicultural bad, Roman gangs bad. That's about it.
Yeah, you mentioned about, because especially those who talk about revolution, they're not going to be on the front line. They're going to be sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
and what they don't understand is that in Britain, particularly in Britain and mainly England, we're not revolutionaries. The people are not revolutionary types. We're not the French. We're not even close to them. This will happen in France, maybe. We're not here in England. There's 2 reasons for that. Number one is our history. Just we don't like revolutionary type. We like things to be more orderly.
Yeah.
When I say we, as in talking about Britain, because as you know, my roots are Middle Eastern. But after more research, it's actually to do with the monarchy. People would never want to see the monarchy fall like we've seen it before in other countries, and there's a lot of bloodshed. Yeah. So if reform were the ones who are leading to that kind of path towards revolution, you'll see majority of the people in this country, majority of them walk away from it. Not because they don't want something to be better in this country, like, for reform to actually get things done, but because the idea of revolution war is not in the DNA of British people. I've not seen, since post World War II is where it all changed, to be fair. As soon as that happened, it was done. So, yeah, a lot of these people, and like I said, there are good people. We're not trying to, people understand this as well. This is not a slap on people who are hardworking, got families to be concerned, got kids they're concerned about, especially with these asylum seekers and migrants being put into hotels, which, by the way, Robert Jenrick was, has to explain that one as well. But these things happening, if you're willing to be part of it and actually step up and actually take action, then do it. But be brave about this. Don't just sit there and think you act all cool and upfront about and be up in people's faces about it and say, I'm going to just pull it out and say I'm not interested. No, if you don't want to be part of it, that's fair enough. But for those out there who always talk about it, then do it. I encourage them to do it. And go out and saying you want to join a protest, you have a fight. Sorry, most of us don't want that. And the country doesn't want that either.
No, it books people off right-wing politics or just common sense politics. I mean, I'm not saying everyone in the EDL was technically a bad person, but the vast swathes of the public did not gravitate towards groups like the EDL or the Football Lads Alliance. And it's not to say that everyone in them groups were bad people or, they weren't right about certain things, but if we are going to have a future in Britain, we need to win the next general election, because I don't think there's going to be much of a country to actually fix after that, right? With the way things are going. I don't know about you, but I do think it's 1 minute to midnight and we don't actually have long to save this country.
Yeah, there is. What's happened, because things have changed so quickly, especially with the internet and AI, is that, if we're not in charge, there's people who have got power, especially with what's coming up with the AI systems they've got in place.
Yeah.
They can really control things. Well, no matter what we try and do, they will actually be able to convince. All they need, really, you have to remember, in an election, no matter what the votes are in terms of the breakdown, if one party gets 40%, they've won. If they get 30%, they could potentially win as well, a majority, like we can see with Reform as well. So, and things can change very quickly. Even if we get power and we make these things changes, guess what? The next party comes in after that, because there will be some change at some point in the future. And Reform are defeated, whether the Tories get back in, or Labour, or Coalition, or Lib Dems, Greens, whatever it might be, they'll undo all that change very, very quickly. And they're prepared to go. They won't stop. Yeah. So I hope that if we do get in power, and yes, we need power to do this, that we do get things done, because there are going to be a group of people out there who, like we saw after the Southport attack when those kids died, there was a whole lot of violence to happen after that. I, to be honest with you, was angry as they were. I decided, however, not to go out there and cause a fuss, but I completely get why they were thinking, wait a minute, you knew about this guy who was a bit of a problem. And after every terrorist attack and everything that happens, as we know, it turns out we know that person was an issue, and it gets to the point where people are going to have enough turning the other cheek. I saw another story just before we started our stream that another asylum seeker has been accused of sexual assault on a girl. There's another one that came up amongst many others. So, if Reform are in power, let's say, just for example, if Reform are in power right now and all these stories start to come out, well, they're going to turn around on Reform, and rightly so. So people have to understand that, yes, Reform understand what's at stake here. And I'm sure Farage does as well, because he's talked about it a few times over the last few years, that you have to get this right. And if this is a last chance saloon, as you mentioned, there's a lot of work you got to do, which is going to take potentially another generation or two to filter through. And that goes for education, goes for the welfare of the country, economically, of course, the migration issue. This isn't just a magic wand or a silver, a silver bullet.
We can't, very quickly, sorry, Joseph, but we can't ever save our country. The fight for our country is never over, because if the public vote for another left-wing party, just say Labour, they can always open the floodgates again. They can take over the institutions. So this battle, like you said, is generational. This fight isn't over for our country. We can always be fighting for our country, because I think there's a naive view that once Reform gets in, everything's going to be perfect. No, we're going to have to fight the civil service. We're going to have to leave the European Courts of Human Rights. And look, I have respect, like you said, to a lot of people who go out there, do wave them flags. Some of the lads are very passionate. They get annoyed about things and they do the wrong thing. I'm not condemning them, but the thing is, if you actually genuinely want things done, we have to go the proper way about it, because when you do those things, although you're not a bad person, the media will twist it and make you out to be a far-right thug like you're not, right? And it only looks bad on our cause, and Reform are the only realistic chance of actually fighting this.
Yeah, certainly for now. I mean, it'd be great to have more political parties on our side, on the quote-unquote centre-right wing.
Yeah, of course.
Out that way. But the fact is, the only party right now has got any sort of structure, and always has structure, was reform. And of course, with the Brexit Party before, you saw what they did in European elections. They completely spanked Labour and Tories. You'd have thought as a country that was Europhile, or supposedly Europhile, would have been a lot more better in European elections. But no, clearly the Eurosceptics were just hammering away. And it showed that eventually we had to leave the European Union, even though we know these guys in power are trying to go through the back door again and will attempt to do it. And even though it wasn't a manifesto, because Starmer is very sneaky with his wording sometimes when he comes out and says things about.
Yeah.
I don't think people vote. It's like, no, we know where you're going with this. You're trying to either get enough referendum in or sneak in from the back door, mate. We're not stupid. Yeah. Considering he's done 13 U-turns. I've lost count of the amount of U-turns they've done. And he keeps getting away with it, by the way. And it's actually quite shameful what happens in the Parliament when it comes to the Speaker of the House not stepping up and telling him stop lying to people about what's actually going on. You mentioned earlier about how long it's going to take, and this the other test we have is patience. Patience of a saint, as they say, is something we don't really have on the right because of what's at stake. They think it's like, well, we've got to get done tomorrow. It's like, that's not how it works. And like you said, post-reform, there's going to be more fights after that. You think that the left will just sleep and let everything go as it is? No, they'll come back even stronger. I think they're going to be 10 times more. I keep exaggerating the 10 times, but people know what I mean by 10 times more. There's a lot more stronger in terms of opposition. They'll be going to the courts as well every time they get a chance. The House of Lords is going to be something we're very careful about and tread carefully with that as well. The higher courts as well. This isn't just going to be, here's my piece of legislation, job done. Let's see how it works out, how it pans out for us. No, this is going to be a battle every step of the way. And that's why I think Reform know that and understand that as well. And that's something which I wish we hear more from, not just from Farage as well, but from these candidates that might come forward and understand what's at stake, because they might end up throwing tantrums themselves and start defecting to other parts, or just going independent like we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years or so. But yeah, looking at Reform as well, there's something which we can probably talk about is the structure of how the party is in terms of people in particular. If you look at the some of the things we see online, is that they're not very democratic, when it comes to choosing candidates, which, there's something they've got to work on and sort out. And being a new party is going to take a little time to get this all in place. But at the same time, I do get the feeling that there is a bit of Farage in there when he says that you guys got to come forward and do your own thing and, be prepared and start held out the branch. He can't do that himself. I mean, this is the guy, for all the things that people accuse Farage of, right? You can talk about he's being a bit timid and a bit weak and he's not wording it correctly. Okay, that's all cool. This guy was debanked, right? He's had death threats, right? He could easily just walked away from all this. He's got money. He can walk away from it all. He stood there and took it all. He defeated Cameron. He actually got Cameron out, basically, based on the referendum result. Even though Cameron they had to resign, but he resigned based on principle that they lost the referendum.
He did get rid of Cameron, didn't he, essentially?
Yeah. He got made to wake the hell up against someone like Corbyn, because Corbyn was that close to becoming in power. Corbyn was defeated in 2019 because Farage said, guys, vote Tory because I trust these guys to get Brexit done. That for me, and I've got a video on my channel saying this, I'd criticize Farage for this when I said, man, you should never have done that. And, it's okay to look back on it now. But all these things keep lingering back in the past. We keep, it's not like, I'm not saying nostalgia, but we got to stop being held back by it and saying, well, they did this then. Look, it's done now. As much as I agree that these things shouldn't have been done, we have to, as we move on.
Everyone makes mistakes, though. For someone like Farage, he's going to make a lot of mistakes. Of course he is. He's not perfect, right? But we shouldn't be splitting off into these factions every time someone makes a mistake or something that we don't agree with, right? What's the old saying? Vision is better than committee. Obviously, me and you are more, probably on the further of the right of the Reform Party. We're obviously Christian. There's certain things we would probably like to see, but it's not realistic, right? You can't, if you're going to win over a majority in Parliament, or if you're going to get a majority in Parliament, you are going to have to win over majority of the red wall. You are going to have to make compromises. You are going to have to be more realistic. Instead of saying, oh, no, we have to be 100% to the right all the time. We have to be hard right. That hasn't got these parties in the past, like Britain First, for example, they're a very, very hard right party, right? But most of the people in this country would never vote for Britain First. And if we go too far to the right and if we stay too principled and we don't actually make compromise, we will never see power and we won't be able to sort any of these things out. There's nothing wrong with having principles, for example, and I'm not saying that we need to sell out our ideas, but we have to sell our ideas. Now, very interestingly, I know Boris Johnson was a very horrible prime minister and he didn't do what we actually expected of him, right? I know he had a hard time during COVID, but I think he could have done a bit of a better job nevertheless. The thing is,
Right.
his electioneering was perfect. He was able to win over the red wall and actually get one of the biggest majorities that the Conservative Party has seen since Margaret Thatcher, right? And how he did that was actually winning over people in the centre and people who would have voted Labour, people on the left. You need that if you want to be able to make the changes that you want to see.
Yeah, there's a couple of things we need to know here, that when it comes to voters, people on the left who are typically Labour, who people refer to as socialist, they're actually church-going people, a lot of them. They also believe in the family, right? They're not, when you say socialist, there's this word salad I keep hearing from people. You need to stop calling them that, because that's not what they are. They do believe in hard work. They do believe in the idea of, we need a capitalism in the country and for trade and everything else to work, and for us to operate as a country and function. But they differ on things like NHS, for example, when they think it should be, it's like sacred and it should be kept and so on. So there's always going to be a crossover, and you'll find people, if you take them out of their shell and get them away from politics, they'll say things you agree with them, and they'll say they're actually, I vote Labour all my life. You mentioned Boris Johnson. He actually got people for the first time who never voted Conservative,
Yeah, precisely.
and they went back to the Labour Party because of the number of screw-ups that the Tory Party did after Boris Johnson. Of course, he was to blame for some of that as well. But a lot of people out there, you have to remember that if we're talking about, like I mentioned about culture, this is why I think reform might avoid this, not because they want to or should do. It's because if you start, for example, let's say Farage came out tomorrow and said, this is my policy on abortion, and I'm going to restrict it to 18 weeks. Well, what do you think is going to happen for the next 2 or 3 weeks after that? They're going to bombard him. They're going to say he's against any form of abortion. The exact same playbook we've seen from those who are quote-unquote pro-choice, or whatever they call themselves. So as much as I like to see abortion come to a point where it's actually not easy to get access, and the Tories were in power, and guess what it did during COVID? They opened the door even more by saying you can get abortion by post, right?
Yeah.
And these are quote-unquote conservatives, right? You'll find that there are people in the Labour Party who have been against that kind of thing. People who vote Labour would have been against that kind of thing. So, because it went too far. So people should always remember that, yes, these defections are questionable and you've got to look into it a bit more, and I get that. When it comes to voters, though, you'll find a lot of these people who vote for Boris Johnson are actually socially conservative. They're not liberal, like people think people in London are, for example. These people are outside. The phrase that Farage used was alarm clock. Well, I can't remember the alarm clock Britain, I think it was a phrase. I can't remember the exact phrase. And it was actually a very good description. You talk to people about bricklayers, for example, they're coming out and saying, I'm going to vote for reform. There's no question about it, they're going to vote for reform. So these people who are, quote unquote working class are looking at alternatives. It's a different picture, for example, in Scotland and Wales, though. I'll be interested to see how that unfolds, because obviously they put a new leader in Scotland who was in the House of Lords before, and they will look at. I think they've got to concentrate on Wales too, because as the elections come up, of course, is it May? I think around the same time as local elections. Yeah, and that's actually quite important as well. But I'm not saying that they're not going to win that, by the way, because for some reason there's an obsession with Plaid Cymru as the Nationalist Party there. You've got to bear in mind that Labour's numbers have sunk so much that a lot of them gone towards, Plaid Cymru and Green Party maybe as well. So Reform are going to do well, but not as well as people make it out to be. I think the polls are a little bit exaggerating on Reform's numbers, but we'll see how that turns out. But going forward, I really hope that when you have a foundation, you build on it. This is something we can't just let go and say we've done our best and that's the end of it. No. If people said to me, so Reform had 5 MPs, Rupert Lowe went to independent, so that's 4. was it 3? I think 4 initially, and then went up to 3. Then Sarah Potion won the by-election, which was a big surprise. That sent, I told you at that time, that sent shockwaves because I won't expect Reform to win that. And anybody tells you votes don't count, well, look at the result in that election. Don't tell me votes don't count. They do. Every single vote does count. So they're back to 4. Then Crew will come along and along with Generic, right? If you told me that after that last election we had, that in the next election, that Reform would be the largest party in Britain with potentially 250, 300 seats, I would have said no chance now. The fact that they can actually win the election is something else. People have to remember how big that would be. Reform becoming the largest party by the next election is huge because that's very likely to happen now, unless some sort of scandal hits, Reform and it completely destroys them, and that's the end of that then, of course. But they look at history regardless. Really, something special is going to happen next election. Well, hopefully, it becomes a majority. But even if it doesn't, that's quite a foundation to have on, going from 5 MPs, 4 initially, to 4, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to over 300. Come on, no one would.
Of course, and the thing is, even if we
and a new party as well, by the way, brand new party.
Yeah, no, of course. Even if Reform doesn't get into power at the next election, we will be able to actually stop the Labour Party getting such a massive majority, and we will actually be able to fight a lot of the things that we are currently seeing. Just say, I know the digital ID has now been scrapped, hasn't it? But there will be things like that will go through Parliament that we can possibly stop, and we will be able to change something. What hasn't changed, the two-party system, since at the end of the Second World War, when the Labour Party took over from the Liberal Party's position. I want to say thank you for coming on. It's been a very good conversation. I want to apologise to the viewers. I have got a bit of a sore throat. I know people know that I have a bit of a deep voice, but my throat is quite bad at the moment with the weather. So I've taken a little bit more of a back seat today than I usually do, but it's been really interesting and talking with you, Joseph, and I would like you to come on more in the future because we have these in-depth conversations, don't we? And I've always said to you it would be good to get you on and talk about this on the podcast.
No, definitely appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And like I said, we're going to make it a very long stream to begin with, and there'll be other topics to discuss outside of the UK. Well, UK linked, but obviously outside of the normal politics and maybe culture stuff too as well. So yeah, no, I appreciate having me on.
Thank you. I will be back, everybody. I will be posting 3-4 times a week. I know I promised a lot of my subscribers that I would do that last year, but I'm definitely back now. This live is like my comeback, I suppose, onto YouTube. I know the views are going to be a little bit more lower, but I intend to grow the channel like I did once before, and hopefully next time round we'll have a lot more viewers to speak to, Joseph. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for everyone who has watched this live. We've had a couple of people come through, and I know many people will watch this afterwards. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. See you later.
Thank you.